Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching. And this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It's great to be back here with you. This is the second Wednesday of the month. I'm here the first and second Wednesdays of the month for the show, the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. So at the end of the last week, we were talking with Bill about voices in your head, and had this idea of talking to you about how you actually change behavior. And we were discussing this idea that when behaviors don't change, and it seems quite logical that they should change, it becomes a big question mark about how come they're not changing. When it's clear rationally and based on any logic that we might offer to another person or even to ourselves when we're trying to change behavior, and yet the behavior seems to stay around. This irrational, illogical, strange behavior that we continue to repeat and repeat and repeat. And we ask ourselves, how come? And we talked about the kind of self-talk that drives the behavior. What is it we're saying to ourselves that makes us do things that are not rational? What is it that we say to ourselves that causes us to continue to perform the same behavior that we know is problematic for us, unhealthy? And yet we argue with ourselves about these things, or we try to change somebody else's behaviors and we argue with them, and often to no avail. And so when you really want to create behavior change, I know this from years of working as a therapist and also as a coach to people, to individuals in leadership positions typically, but also for other kinds of coaching, career coaching, life coaching, so forth. It's this knowledge of understanding what drives the behavior, what motivates the behavior. And so part of that is to listen to what we say to ourselves. And behind what we're saying to ourselves is this elusive but meaningful feeling or emotion that drives these things. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings, but fortunately or unfortunately, emotions often drive our decisions, our behaviors, much of what we do in life. So I wanted to invite Bill if he wants to call back in, and we can talk some more about that. The number to call is 203-336-9756. The show again is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Last week's show, where I was talking a lot with people with the idea of there are certain emotions that are better emotions for creating and achieving a certain task or outcome that we're looking to have happen. And so today's show, while I always like to have people call in, I also want to share with you a couple of thoughts that I have today. And I wanted to talk about the idea of an emotion roadmap, meaning that sometimes the feelings we're having aren't always useful for what we're trying to get done. And so instead of the feelings we have, I like to think about what is it that would be ideal to feel? What feelings would really help with what I'm trying to get done? And since that's the foundation, if you will, if that's the focal point of the emotion roadmap, is this idea that there are times when feelings that we have are informative. They're always useful to understand what's behind them and where they're coming from, but sometimes they're not helpful. And when we realize that a feeling we're having isn't helpful, we want to look and think and consider what would be ideal to feel. Right now, if I could create any feeling I wanted, what would it be? what would be really ideal to feel? And in saying that, I'd like you to consider a couple of things. I want to talk about two topics, and I want to talk about the feelings I think that would be created to help achieve an outcome that isn't typical to this show. In other words, when I talk on this show, usually what I have happen is someone will call in, one of the people who listens regularly, and thank you all for tuning in who are regular listeners. I always appreciate that. And I think I mentioned I mentioned last week that one of the listeners to our show, a fellow named Dan from Reading, had listened regularly, and when the library in Reading and the Small Business Council or Circle in Reading was looking for a speaker on emotional intelligence, Dan said they ought to give me a call. So I had a chance to go up, and my presentation was about an hour and a half long, and it was really important, I thought, one, to establish in people's minds, why is emotional intelligence important? Why is it important to understand how feelings impact our thinking and impact our behaviors? What are the consequences if we pay no attention to our feelings? What are the dangers, the unforeseen circumstances that are going to cause problems either immediately or later in life for us when we don't pay attention to our feelings? And I really wanted people to understand the power and the reasoning behind why I do the show. And what the science of emotional intelligence has taught us, which is that it's so helpful if we think and focus on emotions at times. You've heard me say this before, if you're a regular listener, that lots of times when I find smart people, when they're stuck, it's often because something emotional is happening inside them, or they're experiencing an emotional issue with another person. Or they're worried about bringing a topic up that they know is going to cause another person to react and maybe overreact emotionally to what they have to talk about with them. So what can you do? I mean, what is there to do? And one of the things that I encourage everyone who listens to this show is to think about planning emotionally what you want to have happen in a circumstance, situation, challenge, a conversation, whatever it might be that you have coming that you know is going to be emotional, and you're already perhaps emotional about it. How do you focus on the emotions? And how do you plan for the emotions? And I often will end my presentations for the first question is, why is it so important? And then how can you improve? And this show is one of the resources I encourage people to listen to the show, because if you listen every week, you're going to figure out how to improve. You're going to embed what it is that I've learned over the last 20-some years, which is this idea that emotions, specific emotions, are suited for certain tasks. Anger, for instance, is an emotion that, well, why would I ever want to be angry? Well, because if there's an injustice, anger is the appropriate emotion. Not uncontrolled anger, by the way, but controlled anger is the appropriate response to an injustice. Sadness, why would I ever want to feel sad? Well, grieving and sadness are appropriate responses to loss of something you love, something that you care deeply about, someone you cared about, someone perhaps you loved. So all this suggests that if we plan emotionally for challenging situations that are coming up, that we know we have to face, and we think about how do we want to begin the conversation, how do we want to feel at the beginning? How do we want to feel in the middle of the conversation when we're talking about the challenge, the actual circumstance that we're worried about? How do we want to feel at that point? And how do we want to feel at the end when we're done? And not just us. That's only part of the equation. The second part is, how do we want the person that we're talking to? Maybe it's one person, maybe it's a couple, but how do we want him or her or them to feel at the beginning, in the middle, and the end? And I ask people, how can you not be better if you plan emotionally how you want to feel during those circumstances, those situations? How can you not be better when you think about what you want to feel and you plan for how you're going to feel what you want to feel for you and for him or her or them? You almost have to be better, don't you? So, again, the show is about you calling in, and partly in you calling in, you bring up situations that you're facing, and I help walk you through the emotion roadmap, which is first we talk about your circumstance, your situation. I make sure I understand it. Sometimes that takes a little while. Often it's pretty quick. And then I talk about the emotions that are in play now. best guess on what you think the other person or people might be feeling that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with somebody else, sometimes it's just something internal. And also how you're feeling right now about the situation. And then I ask, and this is so key, what would be ideal for you to feel and for him or her or them to feel? That's the key. What would be ideal to feel? And how do you get from what you are feeling to what's ideal? And that's what the show is about, is teaching you how to think like that, to capture and embrace and embed that formula for dealing with emotional stuff by thinking about, what am I feeling? And what is whoever else's key feeling? What would be ideal for me to feel? What would be ideal for that other key person or people to feel? And how do I get there? How do I get from anxious to confident, from betrayed to trusting? How do I make that happen? So that's the idea. If you call in and you've got something and I help walk you through that, then everybody else is learning. That's the reason I volunteer to do the show now in its 10th year, by the way. Again, you're listening to Chuck Wolf. This is WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, and we serve Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York. And we're also streamed on WPKN.org, and my shows mostly are available on SoundCloud, Stitcher, or iTunes. And you can also find a number of shows I really like that I've posted on the public radio exchange, prx.org. Well, today I came in with a couple of topics. So again, if you want to call, you're certainly welcome to call. But I want to show you in these topics how you use the emotion roadmap more broadly than thinking just on an individual basis. So let me give you the context. So one of the things that's happening in our state, as most of you are probably aware, is that marijuana, recreational marijuana, is going to be legal in Connecticut. I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but it appears that it's on the road to legalization, and it's just a question more about when and how. I think something's going to be passed. They'll have to figure out the logistics. That takes time. So it's not necessarily something that people are going to be able to go down to their pot store and buy something in the next couple of months. It might take a year or so to get the recreational structure in place to make it happen. But it is going to happen. Now, there's a variety of reasons for why it's happening, and I don't really want to go into the reasons about why it's happening. It just is. And there's pros and cons, and I've seen the arguments, been around the arguments, and I suspect that many of the listeners have as well to the radio station. And I know there are people that watch this my radio show on Simsbury and YouTube. And so, by the way, you can also see my shows if you go to simsburytv.org on YouTube, in case you want to, for whatever reason, you want to watch it live, and not live, but you see me broadcasting. Some people really enjoy that. So, and you may be one of them. So you can find my shows on YouTube by going to simsburytv.org and typing in Emotion Roadmap. But today I wanted to talk about marijuana and how people are feeling about it. That's because the show's focus isn't about pot sales and marijuana. The show's focus is about how do you change feelings? How do you understand what feelings are important to feel for given situations that you have outcomes you want to achieve? So it looks like legalization is happening. And so one of the things that I did was I read I get the Hartford Courant along with several other newspapers I read. And one of the editorials one day, no, maybe it was an editorial, it might have been an editorial, or it was a news article, but I want a quote from it, and then I wrote a letter to the editor, and it just got published last night. And so if you want to see the letter, you can go to Hartford Courant, Courant is C-O-U-R-A-N-T, letters to the editor, and just Google it, and you'll find that the letter was just printed last night. But I wanted to read it to you, because I want to talk about the feelings that a couple of different elected officials had, and my response to that, and how to find a way to get people to feel good about what's coming relative to legalization. So I can remember most of the letter, but I wanted to read it to you because I spent a lot of time thinking about how to write the letter. So on May 2nd, this is what the letter says. On May 2nd, 2019, the Courant reported Representative Scanlon advocated using money from marijuana sales for mental health and substance abuse. Senator Sampson countered that using funds to address problems created by legalization makes no sense. So let me take a second just to talk about that. So Representative Scanlon, who I believe is from Guilford, thought to use the money to address issues around mental health and substance abuse. It's a lovely idea. But Senator Scanlon, who's from Southington, I believe, thought, this is crazy. If we're going to legalize recreational marijuana, and now he didn't say this, I'm just saying what I think, how I interpret his point, was that if we're going to legalize recreational marijuana, we're going to cause more people to need mental health counseling and more people to abuse substances, and that's how we're going to use the money. That just makes no sense to him. And what I wrote in my next sentence in the letter was, I agree. What I mean is, I agree with both of them. I think you should do something around mental health, but I also don't think you should do it retroactively. In other words, when you get more problems that you then pour money in to address them. And so here's my solution. And what I wanted to create was the feelings that both of them could be supportive of why and how we use the funds to address mental health issues, but in a proactive way. So here's the letter. So rather than use funds reactively, use funds proactively to improve mental health by introducing social and emotional learning into Connecticut schools. Students high in emotional intelligence are more socially adept, responsible, better students with higher test scores, higher self-esteem, and use less alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs. Many programs teach about emotional intelligence. One successful program is Yale's Ruler. Recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate emotions. It has been or is being implemented in Bridgeport, Branford, Hamden, Hartford, Milford, New Haven, Stamford, and West Hartford, and schools worldwide. If a significant percentage of funds from marijuana sales support social and emotional programming in Connecticut schools, our children will benefit and more families will wish to live here. Children who effectively manage emotions will have better mental health and are less likely to use alcohol or drugs. Governor Lamont and legislators study the topic and contact Yale to hear about the positive experiences in Connecticut schools. Let's lead in social and emotional learning. So that's my letter to the editor, and I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. The goal is, in the emotion roadmap, to create feelings in others that will support an outcome that you wish to see achieved. So let me explain the concept behind the letter. So on the one hand, we have a Representative Guilford who feels that she'd like to see the money used for mental health and address people engaged in substance abuse to help them. And Senator Scanlon, who is thinking that it made no sense, he said, to use funds that we get as income from sales of marijuana that simply increase the load of people needing mental health counseling and the number of people using substances inappropriately. And I said, let's use the funds to create social and emotional learning in our schools so that people's mental health gets better on the front end so that less people feel the need to engage and abuse alcohol and other substances, whether cigarettes or drugs. And I thought, that's an argument that should appeal to both, shouldn't it? At least that's my concept, my theory. I also believe that Connecticut is one of the few states that's lost a lot of people in a number of years. People don't necessarily want to live here. Now, I know a lot of people do love Connecticut, and I love living here, but there's not. I guess the facts are that we've had people leaving our state more than we've had people coming to our state for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that attracts families to places to live is what's the quality of schools. And if we were known as the state that embraced social and emotional learning in our schools, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but how we do that and so forth. But if we help our kids to learn how to manage their emotions when they're very young, And we teach our teachers and our principals and the parents of those children also some of the same tools we're teaching the kids in schools as part of a holistic curriculum. We become a very attractive place to raise our children. One of the things I don't say, but I actually believe is true also, another benefit is that sometimes we have these people. We just had another horrific event in Colorado where there's another school shooting. Now, I can't speak to why every child or every individual that goes back to a school that they were a part of chooses to shoot other people in that school. I mean, there's probably a myriad of reasons that happens. But one of the things that I know happens when you introduce social and emotional learning in schools is that it becomes a much more inclusive school culture. Everyone gets to know a little bit more about people who are like them, which is easy because that's who we're attracted to. But also they get to learn a lot about the people who are different, about the diversity of people, and they feel more understanding and empathetic to each other, and people feel more included. And when kids feel included, somebody might still have mental health problems that cause them to want to shoot somebody, but if they feel like the school embraced them, there's less chance, at least in my mind. I have no research evidence to support this, but at least in my mind, I really believe that it's less likely that someone would be a shooter in a school if they felt that school highly valued them, if the people in that school were much less likely to ever engage in things that we see in many schools like bullying and other socially abusive behaviors towards children or kids that seem a bit different than the norm. What if we addressed all of that and life got better for everybody in schools? So I think we do a myriad of positive things. We encourage people to love school and care about school, and in ways that I don't think happen with a structured approach as much as they will and do when social emotional learning programs are in place. And by the way, it doesn't have to be Ruler. It doesn't have to be the Yale program. I like Yale's program because I know it, and I was actually helpful with the director early on when it was first starting out in terms of the way this program got started. And I'll say more about that. But there are lots of good programs. It doesn't have to be the Yale program. But just the idea of a character education or a socially emotionally learning curriculum in schools as a way of using the funds that come from recreational marijuana sales to promote healthy, high self-esteem achieving kids who feel no need to take drugs or smoke cigarettes or have alcohol, or at least much less need. And there's evidence to support that. So I think there's a lot of reasons why an approach like this might work. Now, the reason for bringing it up on my radio show is because I have a forum. This radio show offers me the opportunity, WPKN offers me the opportunity to talk with all of you about that and see whether or not I've touched you or reached you and made you think, you know what, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So even if I'm against marijuana, you know, if you're out there listening and you happen to be against the idea of legalizing marijuana, but you know it's coming, don't you think we should do something proactive with those funds instead of just throwing it into the general pool and hoping the government figures out what to do with the dollars wisely? Wouldn't it be great if we could have a high percentage of the funds going into helping different communities in Connecticut, all of us in every town, knowing that our kids were growing up with the idea of understanding how to get along better and work better together? I've got a caller. Okay. Whoa. I'm sorry about that. Wow, that was awful. A couple people called, and I tried to answer the phone, but it didn't seem to work. You want to try again, if you like? Sorry, that's awful news. Apologize for that. Okay. Anyway, so the concept is interesting. I think. I hope you find it interesting and powerful. And what I would encourage you to do is to think about this. And if you think it's a good idea, contact your state legislator. You know, I think it's Congressman Himes in this area. My congresswoman is Congresswoman Hayes. Okay, here we go. Let's try this. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who's calling, please?
My name is Tom from Trumbull.
Hi, Tom. How you
Hi.
doing?
I wholeheartedly agree with everything you've said in the last 10 minutes or so. And the only caveat in that equation, I had a very good neighbor who was a state representative for many years. And I asked him, since my wife's profession, she deals with a lot of teachers.
Okay.
And the hue and cry is always no supplies. They're buying their kids pencils. They're buying their kids backpacks. They're doing all these things. So I asked Anthony, who was my representative, I said, wasn't the casino supposed to offer this cornucopia of revenues to support education and all the costs involved with that? And he literally, he got this look on his face. He goes, nothing is earmarked. Everything goes into the general fund, and then they just scoop out whatever they want. And this state is in such a horrific deficit situation. I really have little confidence that anything earmarked in the way you explain would ever be used for any of those purposes. So that's my real concern about this.
So you're on board, Tom, with the idea of using the funds this way, but you're worried and concerned that even if people said they were going to do that, just like with the money that was generated from the casinos, it goes into the general fund, and somehow we just hope that the government uses those funds wisely. And then
that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Tom, I share your concern. I'm very concerned about it too. And I know that there's ideas about how you can, keep certain funds, in theory at least, in this concept of a lockbox where, whatever funds we get, whatever we bring in, it has to be used in a certain way, and that you can set up procedures and guidelines and even laws to protect those funds. Now, the only reason that would happen is if there's a strong push from every legislator out there to say that that's what we want. Because again, part of the reason that people will want this is they're afraid that if we don't do something, we're just going to, the people that are afraid of marijuana coming into being legalized here, I know all the arguments, both pro and con, but the argument's con, which is that there's likely to be more people who are going to use it because it's legal now and it's even easier than it is already to get these drugs. And it's in everybody's household because people have it and it's not hidden so much anymore. So that maybe they're concerned that kids are going to feel more ease at using, and so they end up, some people will get addicted and have problems that are further abuse of harder drugs and so forth. And so a lockbox that says, well, let's be proactive and make sure that whatever money we have goes into, taking care of kids on the front end of all this stuff and helps them be mentally healthy and higher self-esteem and better students and more inclusive and all those benefits I talked about that research shows that comes with being higher in emotional intelligence. We'd have to have a demand and a real push. And then I think it's an attraction for the state, too. We're trying to figure out how to attract more people. It'd have to be something that people were passionate about. Now, I heard your passion in your voice, and I hear your concerns, and I feel them. I feel the same concerns. But I think if you go out and you talk to your legislators and you say, look, if we do this, we got to put it in some way that we protect that money. I don't care what you call it, whether it's a lockbox or some kind of formula that goes into the government says, whatever we get in, this amount of money is going into that pool, and it's going to be used to research and understand how do we get more of these programs into our schools. I don't know how else that happens.
Well, I'd like to, in some sense, see if there's anything that is protected in that way within the state budget. Because, once again, getting back to the deficit situation of the state, they want to plug in more tolls.
Right.
I don't, once again, not knowing if there's any mechanism in place right now that supports funds earmarked for any particular purpose.
Well, I can't help with that because this isn't a show about politics.
Oh, sure. No, I understand entirely. And look, you put many things out there that are heartfelt. I feel the same way about much of it.
Well, let me say thank you for the call because you called up, you were very passionate about it, and also, Tom, I'd encourage you to talk to your legislator about it. I believe legislators respond when there's enough of us who believe in something. I've seen things change that would seem like they were impossible to change, but when enough people go up and let their legislator know either through a phone call, through an email, or actually ask to see them, I think things change. But it has to be a lot of us. And it can't just be, one person makes a call. That's what my letter was about. I'm hoping people will look at the letter and hopefully call the congressman. That's why I'm spending some time. Because I want to create the feelings in each of you as a listener that drives that passionate response that creates the feelings in the legislator, in the elected official. By the way, Governor Lamont taught in Bridgeport schools. And he has contacts there, so he's got to know that there's people that are paying, that are involved with this ruler program, and there's some positive benefits accruing from it. I mean, it's not a magic bullet, but it's worth paying attention to.
I worked briefly with a woman, Tara Cook Lipman, who proactively, as a private citizen, put together a coalition of both parties that allowed her to push for the GMO labeling in this, which ultimately didn't really make much difference. But it was amazing to talk to her and feel that she was able to do that as a private citizen. So, yeah, I agree it can be done. I appreciate your time, and I'll let you go for now.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Thanks for the call.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye. Well, it's always better when I can figure out how to answer the phones correctly. Thanks a lot for the phone call, Tom. So if you're just tuning in, then what we're talking about is I had put together this concept of a letter that went to the editor at Hartford Courant, and the concept was trying to address what happens with any possible revenues that come from marijuana. So let me just give you what the headline was for the Courant, and what they featured was, it said, if a significant percentage of funds from marijuana sales support social and emotional programming in Connecticut schools, our children will benefit. More families will want to live here. Children who effectively manage emotions will have better mental health and are less likely to use alcohol and drugs. So that's kind of the heart of the letter. That's what I was writing about. And so if you can just understand that one of the things we want here is just this idea that when we have something we're passionate about and we care deeply about, and we want to make it happen in our world, in our time, while we're alive, and we have some ability to influence that the tagline of this show is take the wheel and control how you feel. So if you like what I was saying and you want to do something with it, then I'd say, you know what? Think about what you heard. And again, if you want to read the whole letter, you can just look up Hartford Courant letters to the editor, because it was posted last night. I believe it's going to be in the paper one the next day or two or something, as well in the hard copy. But the concept is that people who are concerned that we might get more substance abusers because of legalization of marijuana in Connecticut, and they're worried that it's coming anyway, but they're really nervous about it. But if we put the funds into something that makes our kids healthier, that makes our schools culture safer and more inclusive, more empathetic to each kid in the school, and we help our teachers and administrators and parents of our children in these schools learn some of these same techniques for managing their own emotions and their emotions with others, the world's a better place. That's why I do the radio show, for things like this, that somehow we can do something positive in our lives that impacts many other people in a very positive way. And I believe, again, in my experience is, if you believe in something deeply, don't keep it to yourself. Let others know. See if you can build support. See if you can get a group of people to go meet with a legislator where you live, a state senator or a representative in the House, and see if you can get them to support this idea that we have some way of guaranteeing certain funds that are going to come from legalization, because that just passed. I mean, that looks like it's going through. I mentioned earlier in the show that I think marijuana legalization for recreational use is going to happen, whether you like it or not. I'm not advocating one way or the other at this point. I'm just saying it's happening. And so what do you do now that it's happening? How do you use the funds proactively? And I'm suggesting programs like the Ruler program at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and other programs that promote character education, values, teach kids how to deal with each other, with their relationships, improve how we manage our emotions, give our kids a language of emotions so they're emotionally literate and can talk about how they're feeling. If we help kids that way, I think the world's a better place. Not tomorrow, but today, because as soon as we start doing this, it gets better. And we just need to make it happen. And we by the way, I think if every school in Connecticut, and there's a lot of them already, you might have heard the list. The list I got from the Yale Center's website. It just says these are the schools we're working with. But I know the director. I'm friendly with Mark Brackett. Actually was working with him early on when he was first starting out on this major event of creating a world that's emotionally literate. Mark and I worked together in some schools in Long Island for a little while. Valley Stream in Long Island. If you know people that go to school there, that's where a lot of this got started with what's going on at Yale. But there's been a lot of other programs, and I don't mean to single out the Yale program. I just happen to know that well. But any program that promotes social and emotional learning, I think, does an amazing amount of good for people. And I'll talk more about it. But I'll give you a chance to call in and let me know your thoughts about this. 203-336-9756. Also, if you want to call in and talk about something on your mind that you'd like some help with, and I can use the Emotion Roadmap to help you, again, 203-336-9756. I'll give you a moment. Well, you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York's Long Island. We stream on WPKN.org, and you can listen to the shows on podcast. You can go to the WPKN website, you can go to SoundCloud, you can go to Stitcher or iTunes. And if you want to listen to my show, it's the Emotion Roadmap. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to? Hello?
Hello.
Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Hi, my name is Anna Ramirez. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I teach SEL in the Catholic schools in the Diocese of Hartford, and I just turned the radio on and heard your program and just wanted to completely support you 1,000%.
I'll take that.
I am a graduate of Yale Divinity School, and I recently was hired by the diocese to pilot this in the schools. It has worked beautifully, although I have to say it has to be from the top down. It cannot just be me teaching the students. The students were brilliant, and they were cooperative, and they loved it. But it has to be a systematic change.
You know, are you using the Yale's program or something different?
We looked at the Yale program, but the Catholics, no criticism, do not have the sort of money that other school systems have.
Right.
So we chose to use the program that came out of Newtown called Choose Love.
Okay.
The Choose Love program was wonderful. It was free. She's done a remarkable job of promoting this. It's very easy to train. It's very easy to train the teachers and the children, and it's so much fun.
Wow.
And if I could just get the message out there that you are absolutely right on, we can do it today. It works. And I just want to put out a shout that every Catholic grammar school and high school should have this in their curriculum.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna. One of the things the reason I asked about the Yale program is because when I first started working with Mark, we both had Mark Brackett is the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence has a director, and it was first created. Mark Brackett was the person that they put into that position. Now, Mark and I worked together, and we both absolutely agreed with what you just said. And when Yale, I don't know if it's true in every school system, but the Yale's approach, and really hopefully all these programs' approaches, is that they actually educate administrators, they work with the superintendent, with the principals, with the teachers, and with parents. There are homework assignments that the kids have that go back out to the families, and everybody's learning. And that's one of the reasons why I like that program. I don't know the Newtown program, but I'm delighted to hear that they offer it for free. It's great. And I think
yes, and it is from the top down. It's families, communities, administration, staff, everybody.
Well, I think that's absolutely the best approach. I mean, I don't want to. I want to say to every teacher and anyone who's listening that might be involved in educating kids, none of this precludes you doing something on your own without top-down support, because I think everybody at every leadership position of children or other adults can make a meaningful difference in those kids and those adults' lives. So I don't want to preclude that, but I do think when a whole system buys in, it is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to keep preaching this gospel of SEL. As long as I'm living each day, I will get up and I will teach it, whether I'm employed or not by the diocese. But thank you so much for giving me this chance.
Oh, thank you, Anna. I really appreciate the phone call, and best with all you do for all the other people. I hope you have a tremendously successful intervention out there. That's great.
Wonderful. Okay,
thank you.
Let's keep going. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay, so Tom, Anna, I just want to encourage all of you who are listening, anybody who's listening, talk to your legislators about getting help with funding for this stuff. Even when the program's free, it isn't free in the sense that it takes teachers time. It really involves lots of effort and commitment on the part of educators. One of the things that when I first started to work with Mark Brackett, the person, the director at Yale, we were involved with someone that was a very good friend of mine, also my wife's first cousin. His name is Bruce Alster, and he is someone who was an award-winning principal in Long Island, in Valley Stream. That's how we happened to get to work there. And one of the things that was really important was this idea that we knew that anytime you bring a new initiative into a school, for all of those of you who are out there saying, yeah, you want the schools to do something else now, on top of everything else you're asking the schools and the teachers to do when they're already overwhelmed with lots of things that are unfunded mandates that come from state and federal government. How much more can we possibly stand? And we knew that going in. Actually, my very first job out of college was as an elementary school, a school counselor, elementary school and then junior high school counselor as well. And so I've worked in schools, and I know the imposition on teachers and educators and administrators who are asked to do so much with so little so often. But one of the things that was brilliant about what happened with this initial program that I was working with Mark was this idea that, hey, you know what? We don't necessarily have to add new curriculum to what's already an overwhelming, burdensome day for teachers. But what we want to do is shift the way we teach the curriculum that exists. So let me give you an example, because I think this is a powerful example of how we can make this work. Now, again, there's a lot you got to do, and I'm not saying there isn't extra work involved, because certainly there is. But by the way, teachers benefit too, because if you think that you have a good relationship right now with your parents, your kids, and your administrators, if you implement these programs, that all gets better. So if you've got some places where there's some difficulty, you're learning too, and life gets better. That's one thing. The other is, let me give you an example. One of the first things, and this was actually Mark's uncle, Mark Brackett's uncle, was a key figure in all of this, because he discovered that when he was teaching social studies, he was a social studies teacher in Monticello, New York. And one of the things that he did, he said, if he was teaching about Caesar and the Romans, and he was asking the kids to remember about Caesar and the Romans, at some point, some kids found it interesting. Some were really good students. They remembered it or memorized it. And other kids kind of dropped off because that was a long time ago, and why does it matter now? Why should I care about it now? But when Mark's uncle said, Caesar was a very powerful guy, and when he told the Senate in Rome that, look, I'm not asking for your vote, I'm just telling you this is what we're doing. He was kind of like a dictator, or maybe in our reference, in our terms in school here, he was sort of a bully, wasn't he? Have you ever felt like you were dealing with a bully that sounded like Caesar? And all of a sudden, every kid in the room was interested in the conversation in ways that never happened when he just taught the lesson. But when he brought it back and he asked them, can you identify with how some of those senators might... What if you were Caesar and you really believed in this and you didn't want to take no for an answer because you knew it was important to Rome and you wanted to push on that? Does that make it okay? And what if something like that's happened in the schoolyard? Have you ever had that experience where you were the person trying to make sure everybody did what you wanted them to do? Or have you been the person made to do something when you didn't want to, but you were afraid not to? Can you see how that changes? So in other words, you're still teaching the curriculum you've been asked to teach, but you're bringing in feelings. Or in the English literature, any story that you might tell or learn or hear about, and you're hearing and you're thinking about the characters. Now I'm reading the book, but I don't really, I don't relate to the characters until somebody asks you. So when Mary was confronted by Muhammad, and they were alone together, and Muhammad was concerned about what Mary had said in the meeting to him in front of others. And then you're thinking, well, I don't know anybody named Muhammad. I don't even know anybody named Mary. And I don't go to meetings. So, but I'm in school and you're asked about the question, and how would you feel if you were Muhammad? What would happen if that happened in school, in class, in a project you were working on together? And all of a sudden, if you can somehow take these stories and make them come alive by asking them to empathize, teaching empathy with the characters in the stories in ways that really engage the kids, how do you not remember that? Versus, okay, who remembers the date that Caesar spoke about this, about Rome? Okay. Well, sorry about that. I forgot to turn my cell phone off. That should be one of those things that you don't forget to do, but I did. Okay, that's done. Sorry about that. But anyway, so the idea is, can you create curriculum that really drives emotional attachment to what you're learning? And so you can see where maybe not so much in mathematics, although some of the mathematics, again, because of word problems that are now a lot of mathematics is about word problems, and science in terms of my daughter is a research chemist by education, and now she's a leader of a very large chemical company's research unit in North America. And she does experiments with kids, scientific experiments, that make the kids just love science. She did something, her son's 8 years old, and she went into his class and she did something with T-shirts where the kids could use chemicals, put chemicals together, and then somehow the chemicals, they used them on top of T-shirts, and they made like these really colorful, beautiful designs with T-shirts. And one of the parents of one of the other children in class wrote this lovely note to my daughter. She shared it with us that just said, Becky, thank you so much. That was such an impressive performance. My daughter came back and asked me, where can I go to science camp? I want to be a scientist. So again, if we can somehow create emotion in others around learning, and if we can teach empathy by teaching about characters in stories, in literature, and we can teach people to understand how it's important to value differences and why it's so interesting and engaging to talk to someone who thinks totally different than me, as opposed to feel like I got to be in a safe zone and I can't hear anybody that says something that I disagree with because somehow I find that threatening. Oh my God. I mean, there's so much we could do that make the world a better place by encouraging empathy, diversity, emotional intelligence, the learning. There's a lot that could happen. And my thought is, you know what? We got money coming into this state for the first time. I think there'll be a lot of money generated as a result of these marijuana sales. Let's use it proactively. So I'm heading towards the end of the hour here. And I want to leave you with one other thought. I wrote a second letter to the editor. I've been busy writing letters to the other. I saw that the Current had written about, and there's I guess there's a big group meeting going on right now in our state, in Connecticut, that has to do with branding. And we were the revolution. It was still revolutionary, I guess, was the brand name and the marketing term to get people to come to Connecticut. And I think Governor Lamont doesn't like that term, and I'm not sure I'm a big fan of it, but then they were making fun of some of the other terms like the Constitution State and some other things. And then all of a sudden I thought, well, I've got something else. I want to read you this second letter. And if you like this too, maybe you want to think about if you do make that call to your legislature, you talk about this as well. So here we go. This is my second letter to the other. Again, you're listening to Chuck Wolf. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And the reason I wrote this letter was because I'm thinking, what would make people feel, right? What would be the feeling we want to create in people that gets them to come to Connecticut to visit and spend their tourism dollars here? So here's my letter. I read the current editorial about marketing slogans and I thought, why not the Constitution State? Clearly, many people are highly engaged in politics, and yet we have little knowledge about our Constitution. What if we emphasize aspects of the Constitution? At the Hartford Courant, oldest newspaper in the country, we could feature an exhibit of freedom of the press based on history, updated on a biannual basis with new information, including a tax on the free press. Visitors could be asked to comment on issues. For example, only news should be printed on the front pages, and opinion pieces should only appear in editorial pages. We could have exhibits at Yale about freedom of speech. The campus is struggling, like many campuses, to value diversity of thought. Again, historic references in current times could be included. At the Hartford College for Women, which doesn't really exist anymore, but the building still exists, we could feature exhibits historically tracing women's suffrage. At the Colt Factory, we could have an exhibit about the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, factual history and current commentary. Native American rights, slavery, the Amistad, and many more topics could be featured. These exhibit ideas could attract people from all over, including within our own state. So that's another thought, was if we want to emphasize the Constitution State, and we know that there's, if you watch any of the news, you can't help but be inundated with all kinds of things about what's constitutionally legal. And we don't, as a United States population, I don't think we've learned a lot or understand a lot or know a lot about our Constitution, whether it's the Bill of Rights or the amendments or so forth. And I think that if we had exhibits around our state that featured these kinds of things, real exhibits that teach things, that get you engaged, that are interactive, that are fun to do, I'd go see them, wouldn't you? And so if we want to emphasize something in terms of brand, if you like that idea, again, the Congress people are engaging in trying to figure out, if we're going to spend tourism dollars, what do we want to feature? How do we brand ourselves? What makes us different? Let's just stop being the place somewhere in between Boston and New York. Let's be something special. And if we want to be the Constitution State, what a great time to feature all the different kinds of things, different amendments in different parts of our state that really feature that. So that was my thought on the Constitution. So you've been listening to the Chuck Wolf, the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. The show is all about helping people understand how to create the feelings you want in others. And while we normally have people call in about situations that they face in their own lives and how to deal with those issues and situations, I thought it was important today to try and address a couple of topics that I felt, if you agree with me, we could change how people feel. We could change how people feel about the sale of recreational marijuana in our states and what to do with the dollars proactively instead of reactively. And also, if we want to attract people to our state, what can we do to create the feelings that say, you know what, Connecticut's got a whole bunch of things that we're learning about and we're dealing with constantly in our current environment, and I don't know a lot about it, and my kids don't know that much about it either. Wouldn't it be fun if we went to Connecticut and we went to the Colt Factory, and we went to Yale to learn about diversity of thought and free speech on campus and the history and current. And again, these would be exhibits that don't take sides, but would feature sides and also independent thought and some facts. And you make your own mind up. So that was sort of my ideas today to share with you about how you might go about trying to make the world a better place. Now, having said that, not everybody's going to act on this kind of idea, but I do thank Anna and Tom for their passion and their calls and support of the concept for how we might use the sales from recreational marijuana positively. Anna talked from experience about seeing it, the program from Newtown. I think she said School Love. I think that was the name, I'm not sure. And what she's doing, I guess it's a free program, but also the Yale program, which is not free, but I think it's a pretty incredible program. So I encourage you to look at your schools, by the way, and encourage them, if they can on their own, to go ahead and try and support these ideas and bring this into your schools. It's all good stuff, folks. And so I want to thank you again for being here with me today and for listening. I'm here the first and second Wednesdays of each month from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And I won't be back now. This is May, and I'll be back in June. And I look forward to talking to you then. And in the meantime, you've been listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York's Long Island. You can hear us streaming on WPKN.org. And my shows are featured, and this one will be featured too on YouTube, Simsbury TV. .org. Just go to YouTube and just type in Emotion Roadmap, and you should find me there. You can find me on my website too, emotionroadmap.com, emotionroadmap.com. And anyway, you can see a lot of the shows featured in many places, including SoundCloud, Stitcher, and iTunes. Thanks, everybody. Have a great couple of weeks, and I'll be back with you soon. Bye-bye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.